dawn, July 5, 2011, the fire in the apartment building was visible blocks away.
It was a really hot fire, and all of the handles and the closet doors were basically melted because the fire was so hot.
Fort Collins, Colorado Police Detective Jacqueline Shackley drove over to investigate.
When I got there was a burned building and several fire trucks and a lot of people working. Lydia was actually gone from the scene.
Lydia was Lydia Tillman, 30 years old, a well-traveled wine company representative, the lone occupant of the burned apartment, and now barely alive.
She had been beaten severely and had jumped out the second-story window to escape the fire. Crew got there. They found her in the backyard, and she stood up and ran straight to the ambulance and got in the back.
Looking awful.
Looking awful. She had been beaten severely, and she didn't have any clothes on.
Lydia, as paramedics discovered, had also been raped. But that wasn't all that happened.
Then once she got to the hospital, she suffered a massive stroke. It was because of her injuries that she suffered the stroke. She was severely beaten. She was stomped. Some of her injuries were indicative of like a high-speed car crash.
Lydia was airlifted to an intensive care hospital in Denver. Her sister Esther got the news and rushed to the hospital.
She was unrecognizable. When I first saw her, I couldn't believe it was her. I would look at her and nothing looked like her. And then she has a tattoo on her calf. I knew it was her.
Lydia's condition was critical, quite possibly, even probably, terminal. The doctors induced a coma, an attempt to keep her alive, stabilize her, treat her horrendous injuries.
Her jaw was crushed in her eye sockets, and her wrist was broken, shattered, and then she had broken ribs, probably more than we even know.
What's the emotion that comes with that?
I didn't want to lose my sister. I wanted her in my life. What did we need to do to help her, to get her back to us?
Lydia was single, attractive, very popular. But now, here she was, raped and beaten, nearly burned to death in her own home.
When somebody is beaten that severely, it just sounded very personal. So we thought for sure it was somebody that was in her inner circle that was close. It had to be somebody that she knew.
So, for the next 2 days, Detective Shackley combed Fort Collins, checking with anybody who knew Lydia.
We had talked to ex-boyfriends, we had talked to who she had dated, we had talked to who she worked with, her family, and crickets were chirping.
Crickets were chirping?
Crickets were chirping. It was a whodunit. Everyone loved her and said that there was nobody that would do this to her. We can't imagine this would happen.
The crime scene offered very few clues.
It was so destroyed from the fire, especially where the actual assault and sexual assault took place in her bedroom. It was so burned. You could basically make out where the bed was.
Fingerprints, footprints, any forensic evidence, all up in smoke, or destroyed by something else discovered in the apartment.
He did a really good job of cleaning up, and he did quite the job with the bleach.
Bleach? The apartment still smelled of it despite all the smoke. But in spite of all that bleach, they did find microscopic evidence that the attacker left behind. His DNA.
And the majority of that DNA was under Lydia's fingernails, so no doubt she put up a fight.
She was trying to defend herself.
Yeah.
Now Lydia was continuing that fight. Odds, not good.
She was not out of the woods, is what the doctor kept telling us. Every day I would ask him, are we out of the woods yet? No, we're not out of the woods yet. And out of the woods is life or death. The hardest thing is not knowing whether she was going to live or die, and if she was going to live, what kind of life was she going to have?
And then 3 days after the attack, still no suspects, no leads. Detective Shackley heard about the man police talked to just a few days before Lydia's attack. The one who was acting up in the Fort Collins bar district. And wasn't that the man the Denver police had under surveillance?
This possibly could be related. He's wanted for murder and he's in Fort Collins. I don't know, it could be a long shot, but they may want to know about it.
So what did you think when you heard that?
I thought, thank goodness, we have something that we can maybe look into.
So, long shot, she figured. But Detective Shackley called Detective Gurley in Denver.
So I laid out what had happened, some of the evidence that we had found.
He set the place on fire and he used bleach on her, around the house.
And he was silent on the other end of the phone. And then finally he said, oh my God.
And she said, what do you think? And I said, I think it's him.
I get chills now talking about it because it was quite the moment.
Who was Travis Forbes? A serial offender hunting women? Was he hunting another even now? The two detectives were convinced of it. But as badly as they wanted to lock him away, they just did not have sufficient evidence. So Travis was a free man, roaming Fort Collins at will and at night.
Coming up, a relentless investigator, more and more worried he's been outwitted.
And I'm thinking to myself, is he that smart? Is he that smart?
When Dateline continues.